right, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's Bridgewater Township Zoning Board of Adjustment, regular meeting, May 28, 2024. It is 7 o'clock. Both adequate and electronic notice of this meeting specifying the time, place, and manner in which such notice was provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-6. Specifically, on January 9, 2024, proper notice was sent to the Courier News and the Star Ledger and filed with the Clerk of the Township of Bridgewater and posted on the Municipal Bulletin Board. Please be aware of the Zoning Board of Adjustment policy for public hearings. No new applications will be heard after 9:30 p.m. and no new testimony will be taken after 10 p.m. If you're able, please rise for the smooth flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, Roger.
Sir.
Have a roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Foose.
Here.
Mr. Wadley.
Here.
Ms. Amin.
Here.
Mr. Sweeney.
Here.
Mr. Fresco.
Here.
Mr. Bongiorno.
Here.
Mr. Gayaski.
Here.
Mr. Seacat.
Here.
Mr. Kulak.
Here.
Mr. Vesio.
Here.
Mr. Gabbett.
Here.
Quorum? Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Olive.
Here.
Mr. Byrne.
Here.
Ms. Sarmak.
Here.
All right, thank you
Do
very
you have
much.
another gentleman here?
Joe Fishinger.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for squeezing in here. We have the voting machines have arrived next door, and the room is now locked and ready for voting. So thank you for adjusting, calling an audible tonight, and Ms. Mader set this all up at the last minute, so I want to send an extra thank you to her. I want to open the meeting up to members of the public.
Yeah, to start something.
I already did. It started. Roger confirmed that we're rolling.
Yes,
The tape
you
is
are
on.
rolling, yes.
Good, thanks, Bruce. Open up the meeting to members of the public that would like to speak on any land use matter that is not on our agenda this evening. All right, seeing none, I'm going to close that portion. Board minutes, we have none, and we have one resolution. That's for Ravi, and that's 97 Ivy Lane. Looking for comments and changes from the board.
Mr. Chairman, one minor comment on page 4, third line from the bottom where it starts the board, with the words the board. It says the board for and required additional D4 variance should be A instead of and. Other than that, I think we're good.
Good, Mrs. Amin? All right, good.
I move.
Make a motion to approve.
All right, that was a motion by Mrs. Amin, second by Mr. Wiley.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Mr. Wadley.
Yes.
Ms. Amin.
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
Yes.
Mr. Bongiorno.
Yes.
Mr. Kulak.
Yes.
Mr. Vesio.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbett.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Rich, could you take us through the myriad of cases that we have here?
So
and
there's
tell us
a
where we're at?
few showing up on the agenda yet, but not being heard this evening. So if there are any members of the public here for Chimney Rock Self-Storage, that's 1661 Route 22, or Belly Holdings LLC, which is 19-21 Mount Pleasant Avenue, or 1200 Route 22 Land Investors and 1200 Route 22 LLC Holding. Those three applications are not being heard this evening. They are being adjourned to June 11th at 7 p.m. at the regular meeting room. There'll be no further notices from the applicant on those. And then anyone here on CX Towers, that application is being carried to July 23rd, and there will be a new notice from the applicant on that application.
How many meetings are we having? How many are we having on the 11th?
I'm not sure they're all really going to be heard, but I would assume Chimney Rock's going to go forward and Belly's going to go forward.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. Okay.
So we're going to move forward with Bridgewater Realty 2, aka our Starbucks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hello, Mr. Smith.
How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Henry Kent Smith, Fox Rothschild. I'm the attorney on behalf of Bridgewater Realty, the applicant before the board tonight. As the board recalls, this is now the third hearing that we've had on the proposed Starbucks which is located at the corner of Route 22 and Morgan's Lane. This property was previously approved for a Goddard school. That's not moving forward, and so Starbucks now is looking to take that parcel that was the Goddard school on the previous approval and construct a Starbucks. So, as the board recalls, there were a lot of questions that were raised at the February meeting. I mean, you had a lot of design issues. So we decided that the better course was discretion, and we just presented a concept at the March 12th meeting, which was revisions that, I think by the end of the meeting, I think everybody felt comfortable with most all of the design changes. We were then moving forward with a basically redesigned site plan. So we're here tonight to present the redesigned site plan. We also, due to questions raised by the board, have undertaken a thorough traffic analysis, a complete traffic report that was submitted. Unfortunately, we did not get Mr. Fissinger and Brightview's review letter until about a week or a little more than a week ago. In that review letter, Mr. Fissinger and Brightview have raised some concerns that require further study. And knowing how important that issue is to this board, it doesn't make sense for us to go in, get started on traffic when you're going to say, what about this and what about that? We're going to study those issues. We're going to address each one and submit back to Brightview and this board a revised, updated traffic analysis to address the specific issues that Brightview raises, with the hope and desire that by the time that's done and we come back to the board, the traffic analysis will be as complete as we can possibly make it. I know this is a critical issue to this board, and we want to make sure we've got all our I's dotted and T's crossed, and don't want to just waste time asking questions which we know you're going to ask and not have the answer. So we need to have those answers. So for tonight, then, I'm going to start with Mr. Michello, as he'd been previously sworn as the site plan engineer to go through the revised plans that we submitted at the beginning of April. And then, Mr. Chairman?
Before you dive into that, I have a question for Mr. Munn. I see him in the front row and accounted for. Our township council has basically alerted me that there's been a request for a liquor license transfer. In that request, the way it was explained to me by the council president, there was two boxes. One was a simple transfer, one was a transfer and an expansion. Under this specific instance, it was that expansion that gave them a bit of pause. So your testimony, when you testified, and you did a great job, it was very clear, was that there would be no loss of parking, and there would be basically nothing changed from the original plan. According to the liquor license transfer and expansion, that there's plans for an outdoor venue and loss of some parking spots. So I just want to kind of give you the microphone or the dais there to kind of speak to us and let us know what's happening, and if you can just give us any clarity, that would be helpful.
I'll just give you a
Before you get started,
Yep.
you're under oath.
Yep.
You remain under oath.
Yep.
So just
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I found out about this when it came back to me through my counsel that the liquor license transfer was initially, is stalled the right word or denied? I don't know.
concerns were raised.
Concerns were raised about 2 months ago.
Right.
So I proceeded to read my tenant the full calorie version of the Riot Act, and I said, what are you doing? I have an application going on before the board right now. Our lease is, this is your 6,973 square feet. This is your building. This is your liquor license. This is what you're going to run. Period. What are you doing? He goes, this is Mr. Desiderio, who is my tenant. I just thought I'd try to get some extra seats outside. And my answer was no, and that was it. So I said, go back to the liquor license authority, amend your application, get the eraser out. This is what you leased. This is what you're going to run. Period. End of story. It's my understanding that yesterday the council approved the transfer of the liquor license.
Gotcha.
With a 4-wall box inside the building. That's what he's going to build. That's it.
So they approved the non-expansion. They-
That-
So
that's
back to
correct.
the original one is what they approved.
Yes.
What
the-
we discussed
Right.
Months
No
ago.
outdoor.
months
nothing.
ago.
Yes.
I wrote him a what would you call it, a flamethrower?
Yes.
Yeah, I wrote him a flamethrower.
Worthy of me.
So your testimony's still valid, there's no changes to it?
Correct.
We're updated, and I
Correct.
appreciate you letting us know and making that all clear.
Correct. I hope I've clarified it for you, because I was really angry. So,
Good. Glad we're clear, and I appreciate you letting us know.
all right.
Thank you.
I hope that was unambiguous.
No, perfect.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thanks for
the opportunity to clarify.
No problem. All right, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad we got that clarified. So then I'm going to start with Mr. Michello. We're going to defer traffic until we can get that revised analysis back to the board and to the consultants so that we can have a complete review of everything. So then the last question is, we do have our professional planner here, Mr. Tobia. I can't complete his planning testimony because he needs the traffic in order to do the negative criteria, but he could get started on special reasons. And Mr. Chairman, I leave that one up to the board. I'm proffering that we can start Mr. Tobia, but he will have to come back when we go.
Not to put the cart before the horse, I just want to let you know that,
All right.
Rich and Mr. Wadelli were talking, July 9th seems like your next go date if you want to, start thinking about it. But after that, things get really crazy for this board.
Mhm.
If they weren't already crazy. And this is not putting pressure on you to finish on that date,
Mhm.
but boy, that's a good landing date, July 9th. You can have the whole night,
Okay.
put it to a vote, deliberate if we get to it. But after that, things do get dicey into the end of the year.
So just between you and me, Mike, you're shaking your head no, right?
Sorry.
So are you conflicted on the 9th?
Yes, so June 25 was okay for me,
But-
and July,
9th is not?
did you say?
July-
June 25th is residentials, we're booked up.
No, it's country.
Oh, yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, then, since I can't go anywhere without Mr. Tobey, and he's going to be out of the country on the 9th,
Understood?
what are we looking at here?
Next year.
I was afraid you were going to
August
say that.
20th or August 6th? No, that's planning.
No,
board,
that's
sorry.
planning
Yeah,
board.
yeah.
So we don't know about that, right?
No, that's definitely happening.
Is it? Okay.
August 27th.
August 27th. August 27th. Michael? You good?
Good,
All right.
Good.
getting tired here.
Put it in there and don't.
Okay.
All right. So given that, and you think we'll, Mr. Chairman, have that night, the whole night?
I do.
Okay,
Yeah.
it would just make sense, because then we could get all of the reports back, Mr. Fisher, we could get everything tied up in a nice neat bow, come in on the 27th and just do the whole thing. So
Can I
let's
ask
just,
a favor? When you have the information all complete, can you get it over to us so we can?
yes,
Try to wrap it up then?
yes, absolutely, yes.
And we'll make the
Yeah.
announcement at the end.
Okay,
of the hearing. Okay.
very good. All righty, so then, I think that's got it.
Does the restaurant intend to open before the end of August? Do you have an opening date on that? They're working hard over
I
there.
hope so. I'm not going to speak for my tenant, but his rent triggers when he opens, and I'm getting very frustrated.
They're doing a lot of work over there.
They're doing a
walking
lot of
around.
work over there, yeah. I am happy that he's doing the work and unhappy that he's not open. So,
Well, then the hope is that we'll go over there for a drink afterwards, right?
yes. Yep.
Richester approved.
Rich says it's all right.
Only if we go.
Good to go. Get final say.
It won't be the first time that's happened. So with that then, Mr. Michello, if you would be so kind, you can have a seat, I'll stand up. It's actually kind of comfortable here. Yeah. So, Mr. Michello, just to remind you and to confirm that you are under oath, and you remain under oath.
Yes.
And nothing has changed relative to your professional licensure or any other aspect of your professional credentials since last time you testified?
Nothing has changed.
Good, all righty. So then, you had prepared a fully engineered site plan based on the comments that we received from the board at the March 12th hearing, correct?
That's correct. We submitted revised site plans. We also looked to address the review comments that were in the planner and engineer and traffic engineers review letters that were pertinent to the plans at that particular time. Some comments weren't, but we addressed as many as we could, and that was outlined in the response that were submitted.
And if you could identify then and mark for the record the site plan that you'll be testifying about today?
I believe we're up to A8 for the record.
Yeah, that's what I had,
I
Rich.
had-
A7 was
What was
the,
7?
was the concept plan.
7 was
On the
site plan
13th.
rendering, which was the rendering of the concept
I
plan.
had a sketch proposed, second plan is A6.
Huh.
I did have something that we didn't
We
mark.
did mark A7 because it's sitting right there. Just pull this, let's just so that everybody's clear. This was what we had marked as A7 at the March meeting.
Yeah, but we're up to past. I'm sorry.
This is actually what we marked. This is the A7 formal exhibit.
So then what do you have as 6?
What do I have? 6.
Because this building signage plan I have marked as not having been marked.
Oh, you know what, that was because it was on, this was on the architectural exhibits.
Yeah, but this never got marked.
I wouldn't have it labeled there.
Let me see. Hold on one second. Let's get this taken care of.
I have elevations marked as A6.
Yeah,
Yeah, I have an architectural handout,
yep,
page numbers 2 through 7 with
Mhm.
A6,
yes,
right?
yes. Yeah, and that was, in fact, there was comments raised by the board relative to the treatment of the back and the side. So we've got revised architecturals that we've submitted back in.
Okay, sorry,
Yeah.
7's the site plan.
Right.
And then 8's our new number.
8, yes.
Okay.
So we're all,
Yeah, I'm
So
good.
that's 8 now.
that is what is marked as A8 as of this date.
All right, so A8 for the record is entitled Site Plan Rendering. Its original date was February 27th, 2024, and it's revised through May 28th, 2024.
So, Mr. Michelle, if you would be so kind as to walk through this site plan, what the revisions were made, and what the impact of those revisions are on the application and the relief sought tonight.
Excellent. So basically, the layout you see here is generally consistent with what we submitted, presented to the board at the last meeting. And I'm just going to talk about the highlights of the changes that we made with 1 to 2 other modifications. So again, your access on 22 is on the bottom of the plan. Morgan Lane is on the left-hand side or the eastern side of the plan. We start off with the entry coming in from Route 22. If you recall, this entry, I believe, was 18 foot wide originally, and we widened it out now to 22 foot wide. This way you have both a dedicated right-hand and left-hand turn lane when you come into the site, so you can split the traffic flow. So now we can actually hold, I think we set up to 6 cars in that entryway, 3 on each side, if so needed. And then when you come into the site itself, we took the drive-through lanes and pushed them further back. If you remember my testimony, I think we were originally stacking around 20 cars on the previous plan. This one is now up to 24 vehicles in the drive-through lanes when you measure it from the service window all the way around the drive-through and the 2 double lanes that go out to the access lane when you come into the site. So we have up to 24 cars that could stack in the drive-through lanes. This necessitated the addition of some additional impervious coverage because we needed to move the lanes further back to do that and lengthen them out. But we also made a slight adjustment to the width of the lanes. They were originally 12 foot wide. We shrunk them down to 11, which still meets standard traffic circulation purposes, but allows us to make up for a little bit of impervious coverage that was added to the site. We also show on here now, we talked about it at the last meeting, it wasn't on the prior sketch, but we took 3 parking spaces and banked them. Those are those 3 parking spaces that are in the lighter tan shade on the plan here to the top left of the Starbucks building. So now we have what basically is 290 spaces throughout the entire property, which counts the Starbucks, the restaurant site, and the hotel site, and 293 if you count the bank parking spaces for the record purposes. By banking the spaces and adding the additional impervious coverage, originally when we submitted the application we were at 60.5% lot coverage. By increasing the drive-through lanes and counting the bank spaces, we'd be at 60.7% lot coverage. But by adding the 3 bank parking spaces in, we're actually back down to 60.5. So the variance relief is for 60.7, but if we don't build those bank spaces, it's 60.5%.
So they will be what, grass, landscape?
They'll be just grass.
Grass.
Just grass area, yeah. And they could be built in the future if they're needed.
So let me just ask another question then. When you bank these, would you be putting in like the load-bearing strata, or is it just going to be?
We're just gonna grass it. We're gonna grade it out and we're gonna grass it.
Okay.
And if we need to put in, if they have to build them, you put in the DGA and then
Okay.
everything else later on.
I think I heard at the last meeting there was gonna be at least one charging station.
Yes, so we actually had two EV charging spaces at the hotel, and we added a charging station next to the Starbucks here, and we have two EV spaces designated at the Starbucks building. So a total of 4 on the
Is there gonna be any at the restaurant? No?
We are not proposing any at the restaurant right now.
So you're gonna have 2 and 2, total 4.
Correct, for the site.
Anything further on the hotel
As far as,
development?
I have to defer to.
I could talk before our next meeting.
We will definitely have enough
Yeah.
feet by August, yes.
Yeah. We'll have an update
Most
road.
assuredly.
Thank you.
So with those changes, that's how the coverage gets modified on site. We also identified the access path from Morgan Lane, sidewalk that's out there now. We show an access sidewalk coming in, across 2 crosswalks, and then coming around the back side of the Starbucks. That will connect to a walkway that connects directly to the Starbucks patio area. And then we continued that walkway out the back towards the hotel building. Now, there was a comment in Mr. Fishinger's letter about trying to eliminate the stairs on this walkway here, because we do have a couple of feet, actually it's about a 3-foot grade change from the Starbucks down to the hotel, maybe a little bit more. Mr. Fishinger suggested possibly rerouting that sidewalk in a different location in the back here to try to minimize the need for stairs, and we will probably look at that and doing that as addressing these review comments.
I have a question, actually, I've had it for a while. What's the purpose of having such a large outdoor patio area?
That just goes back to what Starbucks had put on their model
That's pretty
plan
large.
for the site, yeah. I mean, again, you have almost, I think it's 40 seats out
Yeah,
there.
that's a lot.
But that's what they had on their model layout of buildings.
Is that their standard then for most that they do?
Well, for this current building that they gave us, that was their standard. When they signed the letter of intent to develop this, to come on site, they give us a package that says, this is the building footprint, this is the signage package, this is what we want around the building, and they had 40 outdoor parking spaces with outdoor seating spaces with a canopy that covers half of them. So that's what they were looking for.
Would you happen to know in Greenbrook how many they have?
I don't know how many.
I've never been in there, so I can't.
Neither have I, but I know the site, but I've driven past it.
There's like 3 tables.
Outside?
Yeah, like 3 or 4 tables, maybe.
Can
12
you
seats.
go back and ask them that if 40 is actually necessary?
Yes.
Could you? It's been bothering me since the first meeting.
As far as, so we have the pedestrian access that we added to the plan. We also, I know there was a lot of talk about the Morgan Lane entry and exit here. And what's out there today, I'm sure many have seen this, it's a very slightly raised concrete hump that's in the middle of that drive lane there, that's actually right here, which probably is driven over by every car and truck that comes in there. Now, we don't want to prevent emergency vehicles from entering the site, so you don't want to make that an impediment. But what we're going to do is we're going to change it from just that concrete to a mountable curb. It'll look a little more imposing to a passenger vehicle. They're not going to want to drive over it, or or in terms of that nature. But a fire truck can still traverse it and come in that way if need be. But more of a mountable curb look to it, as opposed to just that smooth concrete, which is easy to drive over. So we can try to limit those turns coming in from Morgan Lane and direct everybody to go out towards Route 22. We also did update the signage on the plans. There was talk about trying to direct everyone that wants to get to 287 to go back out towards 22. So we put a sign sign directly across from the drive-through that basically says for Route 287, go this way on the site. And we added another exit sign over here for that same thing to direct vehicles if they want to get to 287 to go back out towards Route 22.
How far is it from that exit to the entrance to 287?
I don't know off the top of my head. I have to go check.
Well, because they're coming in on the right lane, and 287, they need the left lane. That's
Yeah,
just
they'll
my
have to get
thought.
across the 3 lanes of traffic, but at least putting them in here saves another 600 or something feet of frontage, I think it was, before they get to the Morgan Lane intersection. So at least gives them that opportunity to have more room to merge over the 3 lanes.
That was one of the issues that we need to address, that whole weaving factor, lane capacity and weaving factor that Mr. Fishinger raised, that we have to do that analysis. So we acknowledge the question, we'll have the answer, all of that descriptive, well in advance of the meeting.
Thank you.
The other thing that's shown on the plans is we added the LED drive-through signage that opens and closes the drive-through based upon the stacking of the drive-through lanes. So the idea is to have loop detectors in the drive-through lanes here, that when the drive-through lanes are full, that those signs that are located both at the entrance to the drive-throughs and at the entry coming off of 22 would change from drive-through open to drive-through closed depending on the stacking in the drive-through lanes. And then there's also a sign that says if drive-through is closed, please park and visit the cafe. And there's that details on the plan.
Refresh my memory again in terms of, besides just a sign, will there be a gate that comes, something that comes down and stops them from trying to get in line?
We didn't propose a gate, we just gonna have the signage that says it was closed, because you'll see the drive-through.
We did a red light, green light thing, right?
Well, the signs were already green.
Yeah.
The signs would say open would be green, red would be closed,
Okay.
is what we were doing on the sign itself.
And you said this was in use in, not Morristown, Madison?
Madison,
Okay.
example, yes. And there'll probably be, again, this, we haven't electrically designed it, that's not my expertise, but there'll probably be an override inside the building that would allow them to close it if need be from inside as well, from a signage perspective. So that was added to the site plans, those details are on the detail sheets. And lastly, we basically enhanced some of the landscaping. And I'll go through the landscaping numbers when I get to the waivers that are being requested. I think that covers all of the site plan adjustments that were done on the plans themselves. Before I get to the design waivers and variances that did change, I think it's probably good if I just show the architectural.
Yes, thank you. I was just about to.
So what was submitted to the planning board was actually two elevations that was part of the resubmission package that just went in, and I'm going to reference. Do I need to enter these if they were submitted?
Yeah. Do we need to mark those?
Why don't we mark this
Yeah,
one?
we'll make it A9.
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 And A9A and A9B. Because what we'd like is feedback from this board, because there's two different options. Which one do you guys like? That's really kind of what we're here to talk about.
You know, and I'll do something more for you. I'll be easy.
All right, excellent. So these are the elevations. There's two of them here, and I'll talk through them briefly. Well, A9A in Mr. Smith's hands, and A9B that's on the easel. These were prepared by Bergman Architecture. And what this is representing is the side of the Starbucks that faces Morgan Lane with the drive-through window, and the rear of the Starbucks that faces basically the parking lot and the residences off to the south. Okay, and the one on the A9B represents basically the rear and the side all having that wood treatment on it, while A9A basically limits the wood to the drive-through window and to the service door area under the canopy on the rear of the building. Again, both were submitted to the board as options. We have no issues with doing either one, but we wanted to show it to the board and get the feedback.
One other thing is both elevations, we took the roof meters that were on the outside of the building on the original plan and we put them in the building. So there's no more of the roof meters that you saw coming down. We took those away.
They were on the back side over here, and they were moved now internal to the building. We also added a light under the canopy and reduced the exterior sconces to 3 instead of 4 that were on the rear. So we now have 3 back there with a light under the canopy by the service door. That shown as number 13.
For the brown versus the black look, is there any difference in the material for structural strength, or is it purely cosmetic?
It's purely cosmetic. The brown is wood. It's a wood treatment, where the black is the I think stucco. If I recall correctly. No, metal. I'm sorry, metal panels. Metal panels. Yeah. So again, it's purely aesthetics. It's nothing to do with structural.
So, we think either design works for us, and it's a question really now of how the board thinks in terms of whether there's a preference one way or the other. That's really the question.
Can we put it to a vote? Want to put it to a vote?
Well, I mean, you vote or however you want to.
Why don't we get some input from
Yeah.
professionals?
Yeah.
And then the board can kind of give you some feedback. Professionals.
Bill and I were just discussing.
You had brought this up originally. I think it's good to break that up.
Yes,
somehow.
and these were the two facades where previously there was only metal panel proposed as the material, and I, kind of challenged the architect to say, those are the two sides that are most sensitive because they do face Morgan Lane, and he described them a little bit as utilitarian. So this was an effort, I think, to match some of the facade treatments on the other sides that he had included. I'm not thrilled with either. I think it is an improvement, but I think, you know, option 2, where there's a bit more of the wood, is a bit lazy. If you
what?
flip, it's a bit lazy.
Oh.
When you flip between the two, like the first option is showing a way that they incorporate the wood in interesting areas that kind of break up the facade, but does a very minimal addition of the wood paneling. Whereas the second is just like, let's just do it on the whole, you know, bottom half. So I know that we'll be seeing this applicant again, and I will, you know, challenge the architect again to do a little bit more. I don't feel it means to be Goldilocks here, but I'd like to see a little bit more
Option
effort.
C.
Option C.
An option C or 3 or whatever.
So, not now that we're talking in reference to what was on the other facade, and I'm referring now to this is Exhibit A1. Because there's that glass treatment on both sides here that there's no way we could do the glass treatment, but maybe make it look like something along the lines of that.
Or, like I said, there's a little, I don't mean to be Goldilocks, but there's a little too little in option 1 and a little too much in option 2.
All right.
So maybe you just spread the wood a few of those metal panels out
Okay.
from the drive-through window and from the other door, and I think you're going to have a happy medium there.
Okay.
That's kind of what I was.
That's what we will
It's
do.
not much more that
So
I'm
you're
asking.
talking like a mixture then?
Just a little bit less and a little bit more.
A mixture?
Yeah, kind of like a.
So take A, B, combine them and come
Yeah.
up with C.
Something not lazy, I like that.
Yeah. So,
So it makes sense.
what was that?
Something like the wood panels, but the different treatment on the drive-through itself.
So the drive-through actually has the benefit of the glass, so I think that and the way it's been designed, you know, I don't think it like protrudes too much where it kind of matches, but there's not enough wood paneling that kind of justifies why it's there. Again, it's just slapped on around the glass, so I think if you extend it a little bit wider outside of that, you will get you'll get the benefit of that wood paneling because you can actually see it, and you can actually see it around, kind of creating a column around the drive-through.
All right.
Are there any concerns with moving the leaders inside the housing? Does it affect capacity?
As long as they're the same sizing,
Okay.
should not have any impact. Do you agree with that, Rob?
Yeah.
Usually
Not an issue.
Shouldn't.
Well, I'd
Actually,
like
it's a
to-
nice clean look.
Yeah, I just want to make sure there was no safety concerns or drainage concerns. Other board comments, let's hit them while they're fresh in our minds. All right, something non-lazy?
Okay.
Yeah.
Non-late.
Yes.
A question. So last meeting, we challenged the site engineer to kind of look at the site and see kind of, you know, what can we do differently to improve the site. So we sort of avoid a little bit of the crossing traffic as folks are entering from 22. I guess the plan presented here is very similar to the previous plan. Could you describe some of the other options you looked at and kind of why they didn't work? In terms of the sort of the layout of the drive-through, where the parking is versus on the east side versus on the west side. Other alternatives you looked at that kind of do not work.
Well, when we go back, this is going back to the original layout. You think that the original conceptual plans that we looked at on the property, we always had parking that looped around the outside of the site. It was a matter of how best to effectuate the drive-through lanes in relation to the building itself. And you want your building to front on 22, to look towards 22. That's where the front of the building needs to be, is where the front of the restaurant is. So it kind of made the most sense that the drive-through would come in this way and loop around the building, because you have to have it, you know, for vehicles to be able to drive up to the window. So to put it in another orientation didn't really make a lot of sense. Where if I turn the building this way and put the drive-through window back here and have the building, the entry kind of facing Morgan, I'm losing that stacking distance that I have on the plan that we have here on this particular site. So when we looked at the layouts, this seemed to make the most layout sense from getting the most stacking, and even after we push the lanes further back to get more stacking, and locate it in that same diagonal across 22 that you have the restaurant at. So, I mean, again, that's kind of the genesis of how it kind of laid in the way it did, and then the adjustments that we made for the concept plan that we presented at the last meeting that we codified with this site plan submission. So I really didn't really look at making changes after that last presentation that we made, other than just tweaking it like we talked about.
Okay, so pretty much this plan here, as proposed for the design, is really what optimizes the queuing for the drive-through.
It certainly optimizes the drive-through queuing, gives us the opportunity to have a bypass lane for deliveries that can go right back out towards Morgan and 22. It really fits the best with the site to get that most optimization without putting it in other locations. Where, okay, I'll put the building up front and put the parking behind it. That doesn't work either from an access standpoint.
Question, how many handicap parking spaces will you have?
This plan shows 2, which meets the ADA requirements for, and they're both fan accessible because of the, they share that 8-foot wide strip in the middle.
Thank you.
You also then did an analysis of the lighting plan?
Yes, so we looked at the lighting. I know at the last meeting we was asked the question, can we split the lighting calculation out from the overall site, because we did have it tied in with the overall hotel site. And Starbucks does require enhanced lighting levels around their building, through the drive-through lanes at the entry points into the building, and in the parking lot areas too. So when we split out the numbers and we looked at just the Starbucks property by itself for lighting, that average came in at 2.4-foot candles for the site, where your ordinance requires 1.5. Now that takes into account the lighting levels in and around the front doors, under the canopy, at the drive-through, at the menu order board in the back. So it is slightly higher than what we would have across the rest of the site, which is actually a little slightly less in terms of its lighting levels. That does meet the 1.5 backed by the hotel, because that is closer to the residential. So this area here is just a little bit higher in terms at 2.4.
How do you know what the hotels are going to be? I mean, was that stipulated under the planning board approval for the hotel? How many foot candles the lights are going to be?
Yes.
That was, there's a stipulation in that?
Well, yeah, it was in the design plans, reviewed by the planning board,
Okay.
reviewed by the consultants.
So on average then, with the restaurant and the hotel, what is the gross average?
Gross average.
For the entire site.
Yeah.
Says overall for the site is 1.4. For the overall site.
So the other site level.
Just so we're clear, then, the overall, if you took everything on the track together, it complies, but for Starbucks, it does not.
It's greater than the 1.5.
So, to the extent that we're looking at just the Starbucks, we would be requesting the waiver for the 2.4 lighting level for the Starbucks, because that's what this board, you want to treat this Starbucks independent.
And I do think then that's a waiver request.
Yes,
It's a waiver
yes.
request, yes.
Could you go back to the circulation of cars pulling in from Route 22? So you widened the driveway and allowed for a clear right or left direction that someone might choose. If I choose to go right, I am going into the drive-through lanes?
If you choose to go right, yes, you could go to the drive-through lanes. You could, if that's where you're going. Or if you wanted to, you could. Again, so let's say you missed this entrance and you wanted to go to the restaurant. You could make a right and go to the restaurant. There's nothing that stops you from pulling into the restaurant parking lot. Let's say, for argument's sake, I come in here and I make the right, and all of a sudden I decide I don't want to go to the drive-through for whatever reason. You've got 2 options. If someone knows about this, they can take the bypass lane around and then come out to the parking lot area, or they can drive around the outer parking lot of the restaurant and hotel and come back in that way. And this drive lane does exist up here, even though the hotel is not built yet. This access out to Morgan and up here is constructed in there, so it will be functional when the Starbucks is complete, even if the hotel is still under construction.
And if I choose to go left in that pull-in from 22, then I'm going to the parking area, the main parking area for access into the store itself.
Correct, yes. Yeah, if you change your mind, you have to go all the way around.
Right. And then the question really is, if we start to back up, because you had testified earlier that the drive-in from Route 22 will hold additional cars. If we start to back up in that lane, the question becomes, how do I get out of it? And what about the people in like blocking that lane that allows me to go back to the restaurant through their ultimate exit onto Route 22? I'm just concerned about blocking that access.
We don't anticipate, we will say to this regard, if the drive-through's full with 24 cars in here,
Right.
at that point, if someone pulls in here,
Right.
this sign is gonna say the drive-through's closed. And we would anticipate at that point, they're either gonna make the right and go around, or they're gonna make the left and go through. We don't think that both sides will be stacked at the same time, but they'll most likely make the right and go around, or make the left and go this way. They'll see that sign as they're coming in here.
Or will somebody be stuck in that no man's land there between?
In here, I don't think so, because if this is full, they're gonna continue around. They're gonna see that the drive-through's closed. And I don't think they're gonna back up in the drive aisle here where my pointer is, between the drive lanes and the exit lane, in that regard. You've got 24 cars there. If someone wants to wait 24 cars, I think, they'll have to drive back around at that point.
This may be kind of a new kid on board question, but when you say 24 cars in the estimate, are you thinking, 24 Ford Fusions or 24 Yukon XLs?
We look at the typical car length, which is 20 feet is the length we use in calculation. I mean, a parking space is 9 by 18, so you figure give yourself a little bit of a buffer. You're gonna, not right up against the person's bumper in front of you. So you take an average.
Okay.
So that's how we look at it.
And Rob, did you say that there's signs for where are the signs that the drive-through will be open or closed? Is there, you said there's one at the entrance to 22?
There's one when you come off of 22 right here at the stop bar, and then there's one at each of the drive-through lanes on the other side of the road. So you have 3 of them in total.
So if one of the drive-through lanes backs up to wherever that cube detector is, loop, whatever, the sign...
That one will close, but the other one will still be open. So you'll still have, both of them have to be full for them both to be closed.
Okay, so the sign at the stop bar coming off of 22 doesn't say closed until both of them are full.
Correct, right? Because you're gonna have room in the other lane. So you would think that if this lane is full and there's 5 spaces in the lane on the left, that cars would pull into there next. You would think.
Question. So at what point then, if it happens to close, at what point would it reopen then? When there's one space available, or?
Right, correct. When we'll have to determine the final length of the, I'll call it the loop detectors, or the but you probably have to at least get 2 cars into each lane.
I would say 2 or 3 at minimum, because otherwise it's just gonna fill up again.
Right, it's probably get 2 cars in each lane, and that's something that can be programmed once you determine that length. So you figure give it at least 2 cars in each lane to say, okay, let's move that along a little bit first before we open up the drive-through again.
Can we as a board decide that for safety reasons?
The number of cars?
At what point it will go from red to green again?
Sure.
Because otherwise it's gonna go blah, 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 blah.
I mean, I think, I like the 2 to 3 cars, in
Well,
each
there's a
lane.
difference between 2 or 3.
For the next one,
Huh?
help us.
Yeah.
One of the things I asked for in my review memo, and I imagine they'll get to when they get to traffic, was sort of a standard operating procedure or an operations plan that says, okay, with the car, if the queue, that spells out, if the cars in the drive-through back up to this point, this happens, and all of that can be spelled out in that manual. That way the town, the zoning officer, if they come out there and they see it's a mess, they have something to compare it to and say, okay, this is what the plan is, this is what you're not doing or doing incorrectly, and they can address it accordingly. So I tend to agree with you. I think the loops need to be a car length or 2 into the site so that the sign goes red before the cars are backing up into the drive aisle.
And then,
Well,
it'll be under consideration.
Yeah, and so that was part of the, Mr. Chairman, why we weren't able to get traffic, because of these types of questions that we've got to take a look at. So we will be submitting the operating manual for the drive-through signage and the alert system. I will talk with Starbucks and our traffic consultants about, is it too, where do we put those loop detectors that will be shown on the plan? We'll have the manual for the board to look at. It's not going to be a book. It's going to be, basically a 2 or 3 page document that's going to say, here's how this is going to operate.
But it has to be open-ended, because Mr. Wiley has a good point. If we have a Dunkin' Donuts in Somerville situation where it's spilling out into 22, the zoning officer has to have discretion to say, no mas.
Yeah, no, I understand it,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. And I think that the board could impose the condition
Okay.
as a condition of the approval.
Right.
That the zoning officer is allowed to enforce, we have Title 39 on the property right now. Are we going to?
We're gonna
Point-
acquiesce to
yeah.
it. but
So,
but
yeah.
not yet.
So by granting Title 39, that provides municipal enforcement power to private property. So between a stipulation to that allows the zoning officer to enforce, and the police would be able to enforce. Because once you grant Title 39, as long as you're using uniform devices, you could actually ticket a person.
Okay.
So, I think we can protect the public safety interest.
Yeah, I just want a defined number,
Yep.
and then it goes, I have no problem at that point,
Yep.
so.
I know we covered this already, but I don't think you can really account for what people are going to do. If the sign is red and said both lanes are closed, what's to stop people from just pulling in behind the last car and just sitting there?
Well, normally what we would do is like painted from don't block the box.
Block the box, yeah.
Yeah, we could put a don't block the box there. That's actually an enforceable, again, talking about Title 39, a don't block the box is enforceable.
Would you consider that if that situation arises where people are just not behaving properly, that in the future, if that situation arises, you would consider putting in a gate?
In the drive-through?
Yeah,
I have to
stop
talk
them
to
if
the
it's
folks at
red.
Starbucks about that. I just don't know. I don't know if they have a gate in their system. They have the lights, but I don't know if they've done a gate. But we can ask the folks at Starbucks.
One other thing that you may want to consider, if not necessarily a formal gate, is just having cones or something on site that an employee can come out and physically drag either a crossbucks or a series of cones
Yep,
or
that
something
could work.
to physically stop them. And when the rush hour is over, then an employee comes back up and picks them up. I mean, there's a point where if somebody absolutely has to get into that drive-through lane, they're just going to go into the bypass lane and cut someone off. But if we need to, just simply putting cones or something out there, hopefully should discourage most drivers.
And that's typical for when they close drive-through lanes, they put cones out at some places. I know they do it for the Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, I know
That
that's
could be
true.
just something you have in that operating procedure that says an employee will bring out cones to physically close the lane under certain
Can you have
conditions.
that put into the?
I have to clear with Starbucks.
I have some.
That should be in the operations manual.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes. As long as they say yes, it'll be in the manual.
Okay, thank you.
We'll shape them like coffee cups.
So, all of this really leads back to the parking, so I just want to talk about bank parking again. Came up at the last meeting, and, I thought about it after, and, I know that it'll potentially affect this case, but I feel strongly that we should talk more about these bank spots. So, how many total spots are there currently?
Well, proposed,
Yeah.
with the bank, without the bank, there's 290 spaces, and then there's 3 bank parking spaces.
So if we say 290, take out the electric one, take out the handicap one, you got two handicap, an electric?
There's 2 handicap and 2 EV on
Alright,
this
so
one.
you're
it's
down to
4.
like whatever, 280, 7,
286.
286. You got 24 cars plus 40, and how many seats are inside? The 40 seats are outside only, right? Do we know how many seats are inside?
There's 30 seats inside.
So it's 70, plus 24, so you're almost at like 100. And I mean, you get these groups of people that say, oh, every, Saturday we're gonna go there together, and you each bring a separate car. You got people that say, oh, I'm gonna meet there, let's meet there, we'll all go carpool to the beach. you know, 3 cars, 3 spots is 3 spots, but I think that we should really think about just saying, hey, let's have those in there. So that way when there's an overflow, you know, people aren't panicked about what do I do. They can just park there, walk in. So that's just my feeling.
We'll leave that to the board's discretion.
Yeah.
Any other comments on parking?
I have a question.
Please.
You know, there was a comment from the Hilton. There is a walkway that brings you this way, and there were some steps. Do you still have those steps on this plan?
Well, the steps are shown the steps are shown on this plan right now. Well, we said that we would look to eliminate them and just have a regular walkway without them as part of Mr. Fisher's comments. So we can look at that. Yeah.
I want to go back to parking for a moment. Are you saying that the number of spaces on the Starbucks site itself is 200?
No. No. The overall site is
Right.
290 spaces.
Thanks, John. So how many are at the site?
The Starbucks site itself, not counting the bank, is 7 plus 1.
Yeah, okay, so come on. This is what I'm saying.
7, 8, that's
This is
15.
ridiculous.
That's 31 parking spaces at the Starbucks site.
Obviously, all 40 aren't going to be by 40 different people, and the 30 inside aren't going to be 30 different people, but still, that's not enough.
So then describe what happens if I'm
Well,
sorry.
just
to
let
interrupt
me
you.
just back up a second. The requirements for the parking are only 21 spaces.
No, I understand.
Based
I
on
understand.
pushing the code.
I'm
and
throwing a
Starbucks.
lifeline to you saying, listen, I think you should just pave the damn 3 spots.
No, I hear you there.
You know, why are we
think
gonna go
that's-
back later and worry about it? You know,
I'm-
we're not gonna reject the case over those 3
Right,
spots.
right. So we'll re-up the waiver request and we'll stipulate we'll build the parking. It's easier
Yeah.
for us to build the parking now.
Especially with all these,
Much
listen to all the concern these guys have about overflow. You know, I mean, there's gonna be certain days that it's just gonna go. And it doesn't hurt to have it. And you're not
As
gonna
long
be
as
able
this
to.
board is comfortable with granting the waiver relief, we'll
Yeah,
do it.
Yeah, you can hold me to that one. The other thing is you can't keep people out of that. Like I said, if we're gonna go golfing, you and me, and we're gonna meet there, and we're gonna carpool, we're gonna park our car there all day. You can't stop that. I mean, think about where we are. We're on a thoroughfare with 287 right there. You got 22. People are gonna be using
Yeah,
this.
I will confess, I meet one of my trader friends at the Basking Ridge Starbucks, and we drive to New York City together. We get a cup of coffee, so we give Starbucks their money, but we leave the car there all day.
Yeah.
And cat's out of the bag, but yeah. And I'm not the only one that does that. That will
And this is
happen.
public.
Yeah. It's not broadcast, but I was thinking someone has to
Strike that.
record minutes.
Strike that from the record.
But people will meet there, and I think Mr. Fresco has a very solid point. It is a rally point. It's good for business, but that car will stick there for multiple hours.
It doesn't factor employee
Well,
parking.
again, we
Plus you have
will-
employee parking.
Sure.
Which
We
you're
are-
gonna come out of that.
We're more than happy to build the 3 spaces. It will require the waiver, so we haven't gone through the waivers yet, have we, Ross?
No, I've talked about them a little
Oh,
bit,
you
but I
did
haven't
go
gone
through
through, I haven't gone through all the changes.
Okay, why don't
I just wanna read
make
them.
sure we get all of the changes on the record? Let's make sure we get that done.
So, that being the case, we'll get back to that in a moment. Actually, it's part of the variance. So,
Yeah.
just to kind of touch on things, there's 5 variances that are being requested. They've been documented on the latest set of site plans, but really the one that changes is the impervious coverage. And that was what I mentioned previously, where with the bank parking was 60.5. If we get rid of the bank parking, just build it out as per the plan with all the spaces, it's 60.7% is the lot coverage, and that would be the deviation over the 60%.
I think that's the way you guys should go.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just about to say, for the record, then, we're going to request the 60.7 be approved now for the purpose of building those 3 parking spaces.
And the other deviations are as per that was already noted previously in the hearings.
Could you just put them on the record for us?
Sure. So the first one is the use variance is requested to allow a drive-through coffee shop where drive-throughs are not permitted. That was the first variance. The second one was the deviation for building setback requirements for Route 22, where 200 feet is required and 119.4 feet from the building to the street is what was being proposed for the Starbucks building to the closest point on Route 22. The coverage I just talked about. There's a deviation for a minimum front yard setback requirement for 100 feet is required for Morgan Lane, and we're at 96.3 when measured to the canopy on the Starbucks building. And the last variance, this was brought up with the architect at one of the prior meetings about the deviation of the maximum projection above the roof line for the screen around the Starbucks mechanical equipment, your ordinance only allows 3, and we're proposing 4. And that was shown on
Yeah, this is on A7, it's, this screen is a foot higher than it needed to be. That's the screen, that's the variance.
But we think, again, based on what he presented about the screen and the mechanicals, that makes sense. The whole building itself is in compliance with the height requirements. Even with the screen, it's below the height requirements, but that still was pointed out as a deviation in the discussions. All right, and then as far as the design waivers go, and again, these are all outlined on the cover sheet. Let me just touch on the ones that changed first, and I'll go back and run through the entire list that we're talking about here. So the first one was the parking lot illumination for the Starbucks. Your ordinance requires a 1.5 foot candle average, and we're at 2.4 for the Starbucks parking lot, as I pointed out. So that was a modification from the previously submitted plans. The next couple have to do with landscaping. So I'm going to go through these in a little bit of detail because it was asked that we break out the landscaping for Starbucks from the overall property. So I'm going to give you a lot of numbers here, but these numbers are actually on our detail sheet in the charts that are there as well. But I'm going to go through the numbers and talk about these. So the first one is the required number of landscape trees proposed per disturbed area on the site. And the way this works out is the original calculation was based on the overall disturbed area. The entire project required 110 landscape trees. When you split that up into disturbed area for Starbucks versus the hotel, Starbucks required 39 trees and the rest of the site required 71 trees. That's how you get to the 110, okay? And then when we break it down into what's actually proposed, we're proposing a total of 40 trees, okay? And these are the large circle trees you see on here, the landscape trees, where 33 are on the Starbucks parcel and 7 are on the hotel parcel.
So, in terms of the design waiver then, isn't it correct that if you were to look at the Starbucks parcel by itself, 39 would be required and 33 are what we're proposing on Starbucks? So the waiver would be for Starbucks for 6 trees. We're short 6 trees.
The next one is for the number of foundation shrub plantings. Again, this is based on the overall property now for both the Starbucks and the hotel. Your ordinance requires 455 shrubs around the buildings. And that would break down to 105 around the Starbucks building and 350 for the rest of the site. Clearly, you're not going to get 105 shrubs around the Starbucks building since 80% of it is patio. But the way that breaks down is we have on the plan, we have 21 around the Starbucks building, and we have 119 around the rest of the site, meaning the hotel building. That's in the back of the site.
And so what did we do to mitigate that?
Well, what we ended up talking about here, let me just talk about the shrub planting along 22, and I'll come back to the overall number.
Yeah, okay.
So there's also the requirement for the number of frontage shrub plantings along Route 22, where 167 are required, and that's basically for the whole frontage along 22, and that breaks down to 66 for the Starbucks and 101 for the rest of the site. And we have 96 on the Starbucks and 48 on the rest of the site. That runs along 22. Now that number doesn't take into account the existing shrub plantings that are out there already along 22, but that was for a total of 144 proposed. So what we ended up doing with the overall shrubs, because we couldn't meet the foundation planting requirements, we ended up enhancing around the rest of the site additional shrub plantings on Morgan Lane around the parking lots and additionally along the rear of the property and on the Morgan Lane by hotel. Now we ended up with a total of 1,034 shrubs for the overall project, where the ordinance only requires 590 total. So we almost doubled the total number of shrubs, even though we couldn't meet the requirements along the foundations of the 2 buildings. We increased it throughout the site.
So from a design perspective, engineering in this waiver, would it be your opinion that the spirit of the ordinance is adhered to, although the letter is not?
Correct, because of the way the buildings are designed, you can't plant up against the foundations. Then there was a requirement for providing 3 rows of planting along Route 22, where 2 rows of planting was provided. And this was something that we had actually worked out with the previous planner, Ms. Doyle, when we did the layouts, where we had 2 rows of plantings along 22, but then added the third row along the parking lot, or the drive lane of the parking lot in front of what was the Goddard School, but we continued that through to the Starbucks site because of the detention basins along the frontage and the way the planting's laid out. We had 3 rows, they would just split up by the basin and allowed for additional screening along the drive aisles. That actually wasn't listed on the previous plan, so I wanted to identify that here for the board. Now the last two have to do, one has to do with, this was brought up in Ms. Doyle's letter previously, and it's an existing non-conforming condition, but since she brought it up, I'm just going to mention it here, that your ordinance allows no more than 20 parking spaces in a row without having a landscaped island that breaks up that row of parking. Basically, all the parking on the site that we had laid out for the hotel and the Starbucks meets that requirement, except for the 24 spaces that are existing that run along the front of the restaurant building. So it's an existing non-conforming condition. It was mentioned in the review letters, and I felt we need to just re-reference it here, that we're not changing it, but it's existing non-conforming, and if the board wanted to document it, it should be documented as such that the site, that portion of the site right here, does not comply with the ordinance for that, but it's an existing non-conforming condition. And then lastly, there was a requirement for the number of minimum loading spaces required for a building, where one is required for the building. Starbucks does not have a dedicated loading space like the restaurant does, but we have a bypass lane for deliveries that can be used, and so we're asking for a deviation from having a dedicated loading space on the building, which Starbucks, that you heard from their operational testimony, doesn't particularly need for this type of building. So that basically, so those are the ones that were changed or added, and then there were a couple others that were already on the plans previously that still remain. I'm just going to touch on those waivers now. First one was a deviation from the parking setback from Route 22, where 100 foot is required and 86.1 feet is proposed for the Starbucks, which is right on the corner over here of the parking that's there closest to Route 22. Then we also have a deviation from a parking setback from Morgan Lane, where 100 foot is required, and we're at 21.3 feet. That's the same parking space that runs at the corner, at the, I'll say the lower corner of the site adjacent to Morgan Lane. And then there was also a comment in the letter, and I'm just going to reference it here. This has to do with the parking setback where 100 feet is required from Route 22 and 50 feet is provided for the existing restaurant building. And this was brought up in Ms. Doyle's previous letter, and that's for the parking that runs along the front of the restaurant here. It's set back 50 feet from Route 22. Again, it's an existing non-conforming condition, but it was brought up in our letter, and I'm re-referencing it here for the board purposes. We also have a deviation for the minimum setback for the freestanding sign. That's for the Starbucks building. That's here along 22. Your ordinance requires 25 feet, and we're proposing 8 feet. Again, that was what we presented previously. There's no change to that waiver. And then we also asking for a deviation for the maximum number of freestanding signs. Your ordinance only permits 1. This site has 3. There's the main pylon sign coming off of Route 22, which identifies the restaurant and the hotel site. There's the Morgan Lane sign. That's coming off the Morgan Lane entrance, and then we added the 3rd sign for the Starbucks building coming off of 22 to provide its entrance. And then also we have a deviation for the maximum number of facade signs per building, where 2 are permitted and 5 are proposed. And this was noted, this was shown on the architect's elevations when they were put up for the front of the building. That shows the different signs on the building. So that's still a deviation that's being requested. That hasn't changed. And then this one was also brought up in Scarlett's letter. And again, this was specific to the hotel, but I'm not sure why she brought it up. There was a deviation from a maximum fence height along a side property line, where 6 feet is permitted and 8 foot is proposed. The only 8 foot fence is there's an existing 8 foot fence that runs along the back of the property here already, and then we're proposing an 8 foot fence on top of the retaining wall by the parking area back here for the hotel. So there's no 8 foot fence for the Starbucks, but it was mentioned in our letter, so again, we just noted it here again, but I think that's already been granted, and it doesn't apply, but we just noted it again for the record.
Can I ask you a question? Can you go over, about 5 minutes ago you talked about Morgan Lane, the setback there. It was 21 feet or something?
21.3 feet, yes.
So if that's the shortest area, well, so basically the rest looks like a straight line up. What's that?
It's parallel to the property line. So it's
Okay.
21.3 the whole
The
way.
whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Doesn't look like.
Is the, is the Morgan Lane entrance sign, is that lit?
I don't know.
We'll check
We'll have to check
Morgan
that.
Lane sign, I don't know if it's illuminated.
I don't know if it's internally or externally illuminated.
So you're allowed two?
Allowed one.
You're allowed one,
There's
you're
two
asking for
existing
three, right?
today.
Yeah. Just, you know, obviously, all the sensitivity on Morgan Lane, you know, I don't know that we need a lit sign there. I don't even know how much really you're gonna pick up there. I mean, what are you really doing? You're getting somebody going down Morgan Lane off 22, right? Because they can't go in from the other direction anyway. Just throwing that out there. What's the size of that? Size of that?
I have it.
Not to go all the way back into the sign package, but.
Give me a second here. I didn't get the numbers, I have it on my chart. You know what, I don't have the
I don't
size,
think
you know.
I have that.
It just says existing to remain, because we weren't changing it.
This,
So I
is
said-
this,
That's the Starbucks sign.
that's the, but that's Route 22.
That's Route 22. I don't have the details for the Morgan Lane or the pylon sign, because they weren't being changed.
I have a big note, we'll come back next week or whenever, next summer.
I had the same exact actual question as Mr. Cresswell here. Also, if there is a sign there, we would want it to be 22. The back of that sign should be.
We'll take a look at it.
If it should even be there at all.
Agreed, yeah. Yes.
So I don't have any further questions.
That's
So-
my direct question.
All right, thank you, Mr. Michello. Board
Well,
policy.
Thank you. I'm sorry, excuse me, I forgot. Review letters. Have you had an opportunity to review the board consultants' review letters for the plan?
Yes, in the context of the engineering comments, in the planner's letter and the engineer's letter and the traffic engineer's letter, we have no problem addressing those comments as any conditions of approval.
So we're gonna assume you accept any comments that they
Yes.
proposed, and now's the time to make that noted if you can.
Yes.
From an engineering perspective, traffic comments will defer to the
Traffic, absolutely, is different.
All right, questions, board professionals?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rob, you described some of the changes to the site layout. I think one of your comments was you extended the drive aisle south or to the upper portion to get more stacking, right?
Yes.
And originally, I think the fire marshal or fire official issued a memo with comments related to your original plan.
Yeah.
Did he review the new plan and has he issued?
Yeah, I spoke to
revised
Mr.
comments?
Solari about it, because when I talked to him, I explained to him what we did with the changes, and then when we discussed the access lanes around it, he was comfortable, and his letter that he issued had no further comments on
And
it.
he's satisfied with this layout?
He's satisfied with this layout, correct.
The lot coverage that we had discussed, 60.5, now 60.7, with the 3 banked spaces now becoming impervious, from a stormwater perspective.
Yeah, the
Does
site,
that-
it complies, because the site was originally designed for 60.8%.
That was
So we
my
have a
question.
little bit of
So
fluff
the,
there.
the stormwater design still stands, still can manage
Correct.
runoff from the 60%? Okay, good.
So Bill, you don't see any change then?
I don't see an issue with that, I just wanted to make sure that it was designed for more than what's currently proposed. I couldn't remember the decimal.
Okay, thank
So
you.
no, I don't have any issues at this point with the stormwater design.
Okay.
At one of the prior meetings, there was a discussion not only about lighting, but also landscaping and how this particular lot could stand out on its own, depending on how the phasing and the ensuing construction unfolded. Just describe for us, landscape-wise, how this revised plan has been enhanced. I know you went through it a little bit with your design waiver, testimony, but just give us a flavor for some of the new landscaping that's been incorporated into this plan.
So there were two things we did with this plan. We added some additional flowering trees or evergreen, deciduous trees behind the Starbucks building in the green area here. But we also added a row of evergreens between the drive-through lane and the parking lane here in that 8 to 10 foot range, your initial planting range, for those evergreen trees as an additional buffer, if you will, between the Starbucks and the parking lot area. Keeping in mind that there's also an evergreen buffer proposed on the south side of the site, but we added that additional evergreen buffer in here. And then we sprinkled, like I said, we added some additional shrubs where we could, separate the drive-through lane here and in the back of the building itself. So we added some additional plantings, but mostly it was those 3 areas of trees that we focused on.
So is it your opinion that if the rest of the hotel portion of the property never got developed, that this site could stand on its own from a landscape perspective?
Yes, with the added buffer we put here and the trees we have here, this piece of property could stand on its own if that wasn't developed. And there is actually a wooded buffer back there now that was going to further enhance, but more to the fact that you're going to have activity back here that really isn't happening there today.
So from a lighting perspective, similarly, we heard testimony that the proposed lighting now is over the average foot candle that's allowed by ordinance. I think you said 2.4 compared to 1.5. What can or is proposed with the new lighting to mitigate some of the negative impacts of the higher lighting levels? Are you shielding the lights? How is that being managed?
So the lights can be shielded, the ones that face this way. I think we said we would do that already. But also, too, the time for the Starbucks is going to be different from the time for the hotel restaurant. So when the Starbucks closes, those lights will be turned down or turned off. I think it's 10 or 10:30, I forget the exact time that we testified to, for the timing of the Starbucks closing during the week or on the weekend. So that would be on a separate operating schedule than the restaurant and the hotel. So that would help to minimize that. Let's say, for example, if the hotel wasn't built, Starbucks would be turned off earlier.
And then the lighting at Starbucks will all be down shielded, cut off.
Correct. They're all LED style, down shielded lights, modern compared to what was built 20, 25 years ago. And I know there's a relamping in process on the existing parking lot out there now, that it would all be consistent once the site is built out.
And last question is, you had mentioned that at the Morgan Lane driveway entrance, you were proposing to replace the curved island, I think, with mountable curbing to give make it more of a deterrent for people to make a left in and I guess a right out.
Correct.
Is the orientation or the alignment of that curved island or the jet out going to change at all, or is it generally going to be, because that's one of my concerns, it really doesn't stick very far out to deter vehicles. I understand why, to allow for emergency services, but I just want to make sure that that is as good as we can make it to deter folks from going not where we want them to go.
I was hesitant to change the footprint of it, more so just make it look different, because I think when you see it now, I'm sure most people have seen it at this point, it's really low concrete. I mean, it's maybe an inch, inch and a half high. You can drive over that in a passenger vehicle without any issue. So I think by putting in the Belgian block that's mountable, it'll look more like an island that's there. We might even, I think we show in the middle of it being grass, whether or not maybe that becomes Riverstone or something, but it just looks different than just concrete. Now, a fire truck can still drive over it. We don't want to have the fire truck not be able to get in, but we want to deter, maybe those delivery trucks or somebody that's coming in that way. Even somebody with a passenger car that should be making that turn. They might think twice before they do.
And there will be updated signage and striping to the extent necessary to accompany that.
Yes. Yeah, we had a sign over here. We're going to update the no left turn sign on the northbound side of Morgan Lane to cover that.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks, Mr.
Thanks, Bill.
I just have one question for you, Rob. There was a little confusion mentioned in my review letter. What is the largest delivery truck you're anticipating? Is it a WB40? That's what the template. The template you used was a WB40, although the plans said it was an SU40.
Yeah, no, it was a W.
And I think earlier testimony was a box truck. So if you can just clarify, what is the largest delivery vehicle you're expecting on the site?
We designed the site to handle the bypass lane for a WB40, so it can handle that. So, I mean, I think Starbucks was actually talking about box trucks, and I'll have to just confirm that with Starbucks, because I think the person who testified talked about that, but I don't remember exactly what she had said, but
And
we have
that's-
WB40.
She said box truck.
So,
It's in my
I said
notes.
box truck, 'cause we make sure we get a WB40 through the site.
That's why I just wanted to clarify, because I had the same in my notes. The testimony was one thing, the plan said something else. And then, Rob, while we're on it, I'm assuming you'll make the minor adjustments necessary to the drive-through lane so that that truck doesn't hit the clearance bar.
Yes, I noticed, I saw that in your comment, we just have to adjust that.
It looks
that
like it
island.
can be fixed fairly easily.
Yes, I thank you for picking that up.
That was all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions regarding the sign, the discussion on the freestanding sign. The sign at the frontage along 22 appears in the details on the site plan to not be lit in any way. So I don't know if they're intended to be ground mounted or some sort of light on it, but there's no internal lit on it.
Are we talking about the Starbucks sign?
The Starbucks sign on 22, the freestanding
Yeah,
sign.
oh, the new Starbucks sign, yes.
Yeah, freestanding sign. And then as far as the sign at there's a sign at Morgan Lane that's noted on the sheet, on the site plan as sign number 2. I can't find the detail for that.
I couldn't find it either.
I think you might need to add a detail for sign number 2, because I don't know what that's.
Yeah, we didn't have either, that one or the pylon sign we didn't have on the plan, so they were existing.
Please add those. I appreciate the overview of the variance requests. I think, depending on if Mr. Tobia goes tonight or not, I think having that in written form, having it written out, a sheet of all the variance relief being requested would be helpful, just for, moving forward for procedurally.
I will submit that.
Thank you. Again, if Mr. Tobia begins his testimony tonight, that's kind of a moot point because he'll probably outline those, but I think it would be helpful regardless for the next meeting. I know the board has had some discussion tonight and the last meeting about the open-close indicator signs for the drive-through. And at the last meeting, I had mentioned what happens for traffic coming from Morgan Lane that comes in, circulates the site, and gets to the drive-through and goes into the drive-through, maybe sticking out, because to them, they're not getting any indication from Morgan Lane that the drive-through is closed or full or that there's any, restriction. Now, I know we discussed potential, I think Mr. Ken Smith is going to bring back to the client, the other kind of options for resolution that the board has brought up. And I know at the last meeting I discussed maybe the potential for a sign, for one of those indicator signs at Morgan Lane, just because someone entering from that portion of the site has no idea, which may impact the traffic from 22, which if there's no blockade or anything restricting them from going into the drive-through, they're going to see other people entering the drive-through from that Morgan Lane portion and go in themselves and say, why can't I do it if they can do it? So I think the signs are not a perfect solution by any means. I understand they're going to help, restrict some traffic and additional queuing outside of the lanes. But I think that's still something that's unresolved. And what I would recommend is there is some time between this meeting and the next is potentially talk to the Starbucks people. They have to have had issues or resolutions in other places that have creatively addressed this, I'm assuming. Queuing issues don't become queuing issues until after the site is built, which is what everyone remembers. And so I'd recommend that, to address this head on and find the right solution that addresses the board's concerns.
Comment. We discussed before that a gate was not really feasible, but maybe cones. I'm suggesting also that maybe somebody inside Starbucks be alerted to the fact that they might be closed.
Yes, and my concern really is that the more layers we're trying to add to this, the more there's going to be a malfunction. Because, I go to Starbucks and the one in the promenade over at Bridgewater Commons, and that doesn't have a drive-through. But man, that thing's packed on Thursdays when the kids get out of school and they have half off or a BOGO, whatever it is, and you wouldn't believe it. The people waiting for a drink, and so I can only imagine a drive-through how that will be 10 times worse.
A zoo.
So because you don't have to drive and park, which some people is an impetus to going, to frequenting any restaurant. So I think we want to think really carefully about this because this is clearly a concern. And I only ask that, Starbucks corporate has probably dealt with this. Maybe it's not New Jersey, maybe it's in Iowa or something, but, I think we need to find a creative solution that addresses this and doesn't take multiple layers of relying upon a chain of command at Starbucks to say, okay, employees, part of your handbook at this location is you got to put cones out and you got to keep an eye out for the drive-through lane, because really that's not their job responsibility. So I think we gotta iron that part out. And like I said, I recommend figuring out something that will not require many layers. I think that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask one additional question?
Absolutely, Mr. Cooler.
And I'm going to beat the parking horse again. Until the hotel is built, you have sort of construction fencing around it. There's been some, it looks like excavation and so on. The fact that it hasn't been built, does it restrict access to the parking that ultimately is meant to be shared by the whole site? In other words, what can't I use in terms of parking until it's built, or what will I be able to use once it's built?
I'll have to go back out and take a look, because there's construction fencing up there now, and I can't remember where that fence is. I know the lane you can drive through from 22 to Morgan, so I know the parking spaces on this side are available, and the spaces, of course, around the restaurant are all available, but I do not remember how many on this backside here are actually available with fencing.
How about the ones behind the hotel?
I think for the time being, I think these, and I'll say this section is probably about, I don't know, 14, 30, 35, 40 spaces back here. I think that's fenced off right now for construction purposes. So I think that would be, out of play for the time being, until that's.
So in your opinion, how does it impact the shared parking nature of the site, in that the restaurant itself and Starbucks might have some overflow? And I know their hours are going to be somewhat different, but just looking for your opinion to say that you believe that it's adequate, or that it'll be challenging, or that they'll find some way to open that additional parking whether or not the hotel is built.
Well, I think a few things are going to happen. Let's just say, for example, Starbucks gets approved for the next couple of months, right? We'll assume that, and it's going to take at least another 9 months or whatever to build. So you're looking at a year's time before that comes into play. Assuming we have an update on the hotel by then, by the next meeting. Let's say, for argument's sake, the hotel work goes through. In a year and a half to 2 years' time, it'll all be done, and it almost becomes a moot point. If for some strange reason the hotel work ultimately becomes stalled to the point where it's not going anywhere for the short term, there may be an opportunity where they may need to reopen this parking as overflow, if it's needed. Again, because you mentioned it in the question, is these are really 2 different times that they're going to function. The restaurant's going to be the busiest, maybe Thursday evenings, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, throughout the course of the day. Starbucks, you figure early morning, and then and then the day goes on, it's going to change, and you might have a little bit of a flurry in the evening, but you're going to have differing peaks for both of the sites. And again, we have almost 40 spaces when you count those couple bank spaces on the Starbucks site, so it does exceed what the minimum parking requirements are for it. So again, we feel that there's adequate parking out here, but if something happens where you need to get those spaces reopened because the hotel is stalled, I think that's something that can be looked at, a year down the road when the site is completed.
But that's really a very good question that I think we're going to try to have answered in full by the August meeting, because this is a condominium. There's certain covenants in the master deed that require full free access throughout the condominium. So even during construction, you can't bar access to other operating uses. So it's, from my perspective, incumbent, and Mr. Munn has agreed, that we will have a submission that will show the circulation during construction. So the construction must always keep these access points and circulation aisles and parking. Period.
Where's the construction entrance for the hotel? the construction entrance when they start building the hotel?
Probably gonna be the main Route 22 entrance, I would think. I don't know. That's what we've gotta figure out. I mean, but if I'm a concrete truck or anything else, it seems to me like I'm probably gonna go Route 22. So, but the point being is that we do have to preserve under our master deed full access. And that's, I think, something worthy that we should actually mark, because I really think that that's going to be an issue that if it ever becomes a problem, everybody needs to enforce, us and the township.
Another question, the restaurant, I don't know if you know or if this information is available. Will there be a service bar or will it be an open type bar area in the restaurant?
I don't know, do you? Larry?
It's a conventional bar. On the bar has shifted from the left-hand side of the restaurant to the right-hand side of the restaurant. And I do not believe there's like a kitchen bar or a service bar there. I don't know the guy's operation, but I've seen the plans, and I don't see a kitchen bar or a service bar. So the bartender might have
I can't imagine there's not a service bar within the bar complex for the WWs to come in there.
There's no dedicated standalone kitchen bar or service bar.
Right.
It's going to be part of the existing bar,
Okay.
which has been relocated to the right-hand side of the building. So.
All right, I'm going to open it up to members of the public that would like to ask Mr. Marcello questions on his testimony. All right, seeing none. It may be a good time for a break.
Yes.
It's going on, why don't we call it 8:25?
And let me just have a chat with Mr. Tobey, because if we have the entire hearing in August,
Yes.
I want to just double check with him to make sure we can get everything complete. We'll have our traffic, but I hope that by then, all of the traffic issues that have been raised will have been at least analyzed fully and addressed. And then it may be that we can just carry it and won't proceed any further. So, but let's
Sure,
take a break.
that's your option, let's call it. We'll adjourn, 8:40, we'll come back in a second. These chairs are in this.
Oh, no, I don't.
Sorry. We're good? That's fine. All right. See you at 8:40. All right, we're going to reconvene. Roger, if we can just get a quick roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Fuchs.
Here.
Mr. Wiley. Here. Ms. Amin.
Yeah.
Mr. Sweeney. Here. Mr. Fresco. Here. Mr. Bongiorno.
Here.
Mr. Gajewski.
Here.
Mr. Seacat. Here. Mr. Kulak.
Here.
Mr. Vesio.
Here.
Mr. Gavitt.
Here.
Mr. Aller.
Here.
Mr. Burr.
Here.
Ms. Sarmat.
Here.
And Mr. Fishinger.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ken Smith.
Thank you,
Where
Mr.
are we at?
Mr. Chairman, we have determined that given the issues that we still have to address, it would be improvident for us to just start a planning testimony that we're not ready to complete. So I request that the board carry this application, and I believe we said August 27th?
We did. August 27th, so is going to be with notice, without notice?
Without notice?
It'll be without. Once we confirm that date, I'll make the announcement.
All right.
to the
Okay.
public.
Okay.
Okay.
So August 27th would be
Yeah.
the day.
So for members of the public, this meeting is being adjourned and carried until August 27th at 7 p.m. in this room, and there'll be no further notices from the applicant.
Thank you very much.
All right.
And
For members of the public, our next meeting is June 11th, 7 p.m. We'll be next door in the courtroom, and the cases that evening will be Chimney Rock Self-Storage, and time permitting, we're going to have Belly Holdings. So again, that's June 11th, 7 p.m. in the courtroom next door. And with that said, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move.
All right, Mr. Wiley and Mr. Bongiorno. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
thank you very much.
Good night.